Greetings, fiends. Why don't you stick with me while I crank that stereo to 11, and you can join me here in the Vault of Vinyl, the Tomb of Terror. This is the Midnight Chamber. Let's get into the thick of this. We got two bands that were the really the spearheads of the early 2000s horror scene. I mean, there were some precursors that came out of the 90s, but really it was kind of a weird time period for anything horror rock, spook rock. There wasn't even the name horror punk. So really in 97 through 99, Blitzkid and Mister Monster really started forming. Mr. Monster being first in 1997, formed by Jasin Trixoin. He was in another band, made some demos. That became some of the early Mr. Monster songs. And of course, he and eventually JV Bastard and Germs and Polly Lifeless put out the infamous Songs from the Crypt demo. And that kind of cemented the original lineup of Mr. Monster. Then we skip over to Blitzkid. Blitzkid, formed, of course, we know, by TV Monstrosity and Argyle Goolsby. They formed Bluefield, West Virginia in right around 1999, give or take. Really, once they got together, that was it. I mean, they had a few drummers. Chris White, who's now playing in TV's new band, A Gathering of None, was their original drummer, and he was still a friend, but he kind of phased out of the band, and they've had a bunch of drummers over the years. And on this particular release, it was Billy Bones who was on the Skins, who Billy went on to play in the Independents and a fair few other bands. We'll get to some of that stuff later dates. So, give a few years of the bands doing their thing. So, a few years passed, getting the bands really moving forward with new releases. Mr. Monster was already pushing, I believe Over Your Dead Body was already released. Blitzkid had put out Revisited, Terrifying Tales, and Let Flowers Die came out on Antidote Records. Originally it was released independently, but then Antidote Records picked it up. Now, things started pushing towards Blitzkid's 2003 or 4 release of Trace of a Stranger. Right before that, they started inking a deal with Fiend Force Records out of Germany. This will become a common theme. There have never been a lot of big labels, and really Fiend Force wasn't a big label, but they were definitely the biggest of the pure horror rock, spook rock, horror punk record labels. And this release right here, Exhuming Graves and Making Dates, which is the whole showcase of this video, was the first, the first release from Fiend Force, the only release for Mr. Monster. Of course, by the time this came out, Mr. Monster was hardly doing anything. That's for a different, that's a whole different story. And so this came out in 2002. Discogs, which of course, you know, is great but has some gaps in the information, claims 2004. I talked to TV Monstrosity personally, and he confirmed it came out in 2002, and the record was only 200 press. but I don't. A fair few of the copies didn't make it to this country until a bit later. I think I got my copy in 2003, maybe into 2004. It wasn't exactly a hot seller right off the bat, which, if you know Blitzkid vinyl anymore, it's extremely hard to get, extremely hard to find, and when you do find it, it goes, depending on the release, $100 to $150, give or take what record it is. This one in particular, I think I've seen it go for at least $150. But I also haven't seen one pop up online in a few years. I'm honestly glad I got mine new. The artwork was done by James Rowe. Of course, he came along with the Mr. Monster camp. He's based out of Tennessee, but he ended up doing the artwork for the Misfits' Famous Monsters record. And somehow, because of the weird New Jersey connection with Mr. Monster, because Mr. Monster was New Jersey, the Misfits, New Jersey, he got hooked up with them, met the guys from Mr. Monster, started doing artwork for those guys. So they've always had excellent, excellent artwork. And then he was also helping run Mr. Monster's Skeleton Crew fan club. So it was a no-brainer that he was going to do the artwork for this record. And boy, what kind of amazing artwork is it? I mean, it is just fantastic. Pretty classic. It has both the classic Mr. Monster and Blitzkid logos on it. And then with the record, you get this really sweet, it's not quite a poster, but it is a poster. But it's also on the, one side's a poster and the other side is essentially the insert with the lyrics for the songs on it. Pretty cool. I'm going to take some video of the actual record itself because the one I shot before, you can't see anything. But anyway, here's the record, still in its original shrink wrap. And here's the insert, which you really can't see that in the talking about it, but I would love to have a bigger version of this. This is the first time I ever saw the Fiend Force logo, for that matter. And then the inside, lyrics, Mr. Monster logo, and some really old school pictures. I mean, how many times do you see JV without a beard? I mean, really? And the Blitzkid side, if I can get it, my lights to stop shining. And then, finally, the record itself. Check out that center label. Blitzkid side. Mr. Monster side. Pretty
pretty
I
cool.
would venture to say some of the interior artwork was done by Goolsby. It has his flair to it. Now, the actual vinyl itself is this sweet slime green. I was really happy they didn't do just jet black on this. And what you get is you get 7 songs, 4 for the Blitzkid side, and one of those is a Mr. Monster cover, and 3 for the Mr. Monster side, and one of those is a Blitzkid cover. It's funny because I remember around this time, one of my old bands, we did a split album with another band from Arizona. No, New Mexico. It was in New Mexico. And that band and our band, we flip-flopped songs and did that. We covered one of theirs, they covered one of ours. And it was funny because I remember talking to TB about that back in the day, and then they did something real similar. So it's those weird kind of scene coincidences where people are swapping ideas. It's pretty cool. But there were 200 of these records pressed, and they're pretty hard to get a hold of. I mean, I got mine new when it came out, and I'm honestly really waiting for some of these to start getting bootlegged. I really hope it doesn't happen because as we all know, I mean, really bootlegs suck except for maybe live shows. But no one wants to see the band get hosed out of their, own intellectual property. But yeah, so this is a really fun record. I mean, Body Snatchers and Return of the Living on the Blitzkid side became staples of their live shows. I mean, the last Blitzkid tour was called Return of the Living. So, I mean, that song really got in there. Then there's the, let's see, is it Earl Hirsch? Bluebirds Over the Mountain is an old bluegrass song that they punked up, which is pretty nice. And then, of course, Little Frankenstein is the Mr. Monster song. And, I mean, Blitzkid just annihilates this. They kill it. TB was telling me that, I mean, they just banged them out in the studio. There was nothing really crazy to remember. They just went in the studio 2-3 days, banged them out, and came up with that. Then there's the Mr. Monster side, which I sometimes wonder. I mean, I'll get on this when I cover some Mr. Monster releases, but I sometimes wonder how that band has such a following, because all the members went on to much better bands. And I'm not saying that musically Mr. Monster is on point. They're just really catchy, hook-laden, horror punk. Kind of, they helped set the standard of what is modern horror punk. I mean, alright, stop. Let's address the elephant in the room. That elephant being the Misfits clone accusation that goes out to every single horror punk band on the planet. I mean, let's just be real here. Every horror punk band ever, someone automatically associates them and says, "Oh, you're just a Misfits ripoff band." Well, you know what? Go fuck yourself, because not all those bands are like that. There are always going to be bands that, worship the ground that Glenn Danzig pisses on. We know those people. My opinion, real fans will nitpick. Well, maybe not nitpick, that's not a good word. But, they're critical of the bands they love the most. And, really, most diehard horror punk fans are aware that we all love the Misfits, but the real artists like to push that bill. Blitzkid, for example, people loved to just write them off as a Misfits, clone band. Even Terrifying Tales, that era, that wasn't the case. They were never. Okay, well, they had their moments. Every horror punk band has their moments. Later on, they actually did cover Theme for a Jackal. We'll get to that release at some point. Point being, is that not every one of these bands is going to rip the Misfits off. Yes, horror punk, you're going to hear woes. If you go to a live show, I used to make it a fun joke to see exactly how many Misfits songs were going to get covered that night. And then, like, you can do a 50-50 coin flip and see if someone's going to pull out a 50s crooner style, like, Earth Angel clone about killing a prom queen. Blitzkid's got the songs, Mr. Monster's got songs like that, and you can just go down the list, and there are all kinds of bands that do that. That's fine. But let's be real. Blitzkid sound absolutely nothing like the Misfits, especially before they ended. Mr. Monster sound nothing like the Misfits. For one, Glenn Danzig can sing, and Jasin, I'm looking at you, buddy. You are a hell of a songwriter, but you cannot sing. Motherfucker, you cannot sing. Seriously, it sounds like a prepubescent goat who got kicked in the nuts behind that microphone. But, that being said, you can write a hell of a hook. You've got it where it counts, man. You just needed someone with a decent set of pipes to get behind the mic. Come on, someone had to say it. I know you Mr. Monster fans out there, and honestly, getting back to this record, I don't want to get off on too much of a rant, but the cover of Dying Day it's just not great. This isn't so much about a music review. It's a great record. Glow and Scarlet 19 are the two Mr. Monster songs are fantastic. Glow being the better of the two in my personal opinion. But man, that cover of Dying Day is just not good. It's not. I know some of you people are gonna fucking hate on me for that. I really don't care. It's in my personal opinion. I've been around these bands a long fucking time. And anyone from the Cincinnati scene knows that I have a very critical eye, especially towards Mr. Monster. Always have, always will. But anyway, so no, neither one of these bands are Misfits clones. We can push that out of the way. Of course, we're all paying homage to that and the Cramps and a plethora of other bands. So, if you get a chance and you really want to, if you happen to come across this, I would pick it up. It's a fantastic little 10-inch. And I'm going to do a comparison with this and the infamous apparitional, Blitzkid's apparitional green slime. It's a green color too. I wonder exactly how close to this color it is. I guess we'll find out now, won't we? So, yeah, if you see this, pick it up. That'll be all from tonight's episode of The Midnight Chamber.